Looking for ways to attract, retain, and engage those millennial and Gen Z talent? 60% of millennial employees say they are open to new job opportunities, which means we have to work hard and do the right things to keep them with us. Get ready because the takeaways from this session will help you finally make sense of the younger generations and create talent initiatives that truly address their needs. Hi, I'm Andy Storch, your summit host, and I'm excited to introduce you to our next amazing speaker. Claire Kim is a millennial workplace expert and the principal consultant at Millennials at Work. Claire has consulted with over 250 organizations on attracting, retaining, and developing millennials, and is a regular contributor to publications like Forbes, Huffington Post, and more. And I'm so excited to have her here with us today. Thank you, Claire, for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm not a Forbes contributor yet, so still working on that. But anyway,
still working on that.
Correct.
Okay. Many other publications. I saw
Yes.
the Forbes logo on your profile, but I know you've been published in many publications. I know you're sought after by a lot of organizations in this space on understanding and helping them build their employer brand to attract and retain millennial and Gen Z employees. And this is an area that a lot of people are challenged with, and so we're going to demystify all of that today. Let's start with the high level view and just define these generations and what they or we or you really care about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so when it comes to millennials and Gen Z, I do want to preface it by saying that these labels, quote unquote, is just a way to understand their psychographics. It is not to limit them in one single bubble and say, oh, you are this, and so because of you're going to act like this. No, it's just a way as an organizational leader to predict their behavior and what they might want and stuff like that. So that's what I want to preface it. And how to approach this millennial and Gen Z generation. So you have to approach them in three different segments in a way. So the first one being the early millennials / older millennials, so that were born anywhere from 1982 to 1988. The second part being the late millennials / younger millennials, you can just call it late millennials, so 1989 to 1996, and Gen Z being 1996 and onwards. So creating them into three different brackets because within 1980s, 1990s, there has been so many changes happening within the world that even within millennials, they are completely different. For example, me as a younger millennial, I don't remember growing up without Windows or some sort of internet in my household, while as someone that is considered older millennial, they might say, I remember having computer.
You could say someone old like me. It's okay. Yeah. Born in 1980, yeah. We got a computer when I was in high school. Started
or like high school
then in the
or
90s,
yep. Or whatever it might be.
Right.
But yeah, personally, I don't remember growing up with a computer. So there is that difference even within the generation. That's what I want to do is emphasize the segment parts as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's all about, everybody's different. So we always have to caveat that, right? Like generalities don't apply to everyone. But in general, on average, we're looking at people born during these specific years and how they were influenced by different things. When I think about Gen Z, and you said Gen Z is defined by born after 96?
1996 and onwards. I like to use the phone analogy for this. Yeah. So older millennials, they remember having phones and sometimes multi-line phones, and then having to maybe one of those rotary phones. They might remember that too. Yeah. I personally don't remember that as a late millennial. I do remember having phones, but it was mostly those wireless landlines.
Yeah.
Gen Zs, the first phone that they might have had wasn't one of those wireless phones. It might have just been their own cell phone with a keyboard or touchscreen.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I always think about that phone too, and I think about it too as, did your parents have a cell phone when you were born? I got my first cell phone in 2001, and so anybody born after that, essentially, there was always cell phones in the house, and landlines started going away after that. Completely defines a generation. So coming into the workforce, we think about these younger millennials and Gen Z. What are, with everybody being different, but in general, what are some of the driving factors that define them that they want when it comes to work?
What they want in terms of work, they do have quite a bit of similarities in a sense where they do want growth opportunity. They want to feel cared for, like every other generational counterparts. But what Gen Z is used to is more independence. If you think about it in a perspective from the moment that they were born and then they go to school for the first time, they always have something of their own. They have their own phones, they have their own device, they have their whatever. While as younger millennials that are born in like 90s, they have to share devices. So they might be more open to this collaborative approach, even though, yes, they want that independent work. Whilst Gen Z, you can pretty much say, you know what, let's just assume that they, not really assume, but they are definitely more used to having something on their servers, having that autonomy, being able to call their own shots, being able to access information on their own terms or whatever it might be. Whilst millennials, depending on when they're born, they might not necessarily be used to that. So they might be more used to older ways of collaborating and so on in terms of what they look for in the workplace. So I guess to think of one term, like one word that could sum up everything. So with Gen Z, I would say autonomy, and younger millennials, it was more so on the flexibility and the freedom. Even though, yes, those matter, it's just if we have to pick top one, what would it be? And those would be the words that would come out.
And there was always a lot of press about the millennials wanting more flexibility and freedom and confining, kind of conforming to the way the workplace was.
Mhm.
And yet all of that changed with COVID, with everybody going to, a more flexible remote way of working. How did that particularly impact millennials and Gen Z?
Well, millennials pioneered work at home idea. So the whole work at home idea and remote working wasn't exactly a strange concept as the millennials were entering the workplace. And Gen Z, well, to be fair, if you look at where Gen Z are in terms of where they're at in the workforce, most of them are entry level people. They might have just finished university or something like that. So they might not have as clear of an idea as to what they want. They just know what they know. Well, so when it comes to dealing with COVID aspect of it, older millennials, they might have had a little bit of better idea as to what's coming. They are in their 30s, so they're a lot more practical, and they have had similar experience as they remember huge economic downturns that have happened while they were growing up. Younger millennials, not gonna lie, when the COVID thing happened, a lot of them did freak out. Was it my personal story too? Maybe. But so when they were dealing with COVID, there was a lot of uncertainty, but I just see COVID as a way that catapulted the whole concept of remote working or flexible working arrangements. And that's how millennials dealt with that as well. It was more so, it was a change that was supposed to happen. It just happened so suddenly,
Yep.
but they were able to get on the groove with it a lot faster than a lot of other generations would have.
Sure. Yeah. And it's not that they don't want to work for with these companies, just wanted more flexibility. And now it's here, right? It's kind of forced
Yeah.
all of that on us. When it comes to, I know you work with a lot of organizations and it's attracting, retaining the younger generations, younger millennials and Gen Z. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see organizations making, or the challenges they run into?
The biggest mistake that organizations make is that I feel that because they are so fixated on the label and the misconceptions towards this younger generation, they forget that they're humans too. They are humans that genuinely want to impress their employers. It's just that their perspective is completely different than what you might be used to. So because they don't understand that, oh yeah, what do they want from the human level and all of these psychographic aspects of it, um, that really creates a little bit of disconnect when they're talking to like whether top talents in terms of recruitment or showing them that, hey, we actually care about you as employees or whatever it might be, because they get, it's, I guess, like they kind of get into their heads, organizational leaders, which is no fault of their own. It can be hard to deal with changes with, especially with everything going on, but I'll say that is the biggest mistake. And when you do understand how like when you understand that yes, they are humans, they just think very differently, and we are all going for that same goal of we want the organization to succeed together, then that is going to be such a game changer when you're having these conversations with the top talents that might not even be interested in your organization, but you somehow convince them into pursuing candidacy with the organization. Or when that millennial wants to leave the organization, they change their minds because they feel more cared for as humans, because humans will never forget like how they have felt, or how they're not going to forget the experience. So I don't know, it's
Yeah,
a little bit
absolutely.
long answer, but
What would you say about the, I'm hearing all the time that our early career professionals, which typically fall into that bucket of later millennials and maybe sometimes a little bit Gen Z, are more quick to leave organizations now if they don't feel like they're getting what they want or they're feeling frustrated. I feel like I'm hearing a lot that attrition is going up at that 2 to 3 year mark. Are you seeing that, and what can companies do to address that?
so even in my personal circle, so like what the things that I say about Gen Z and younger millennials, yes, they are based on research, but a lot of it is also based on this dinner conversation. So
Mm,
it's very interesting blend. I definitely have seen more millennial professionals wanting to leave the organization and then coming to me asking for resume advices, even in times like this, because oddly enough, everything that's happening around them is making them realize what I want in life, or like, do I want to work with this organization if this were to be the last organization that I ever work with before the world ends? So this is pushing them to take action on one another, whether they decide to stick with the organization forever or go back to school or whatever it might be. So yes, the attrition rate is going up, and it's definitely a lot volatile even in the times like this. And how the organization would be able to avoid that is, well, there's definitely different components to address, and it does depend on the organization's culture and stuff like that. But I do want to bring up something pretty shocking over here, is that millennials actually, like, there has been studies, I'm going to have to send you the link when I do find it, but there has been studies saying that millennials actually do intend on staying in an organization for more than just like 2 to 3 years, except they just happen to be in that job hopping tendency. And the other thing that I want to be addressing is the fact that millennial managers, if you're looking at different resignation rates compared to different generational counterparts, they have the lowest resignation rates out of all other generational counterparts. So if we're looking at components like that, the key to really a key to retaining millennials in the organization is, number one, showing them you actually care about them as person, which is something that is universal for other generation, and then being invested in their growth. Being invested in their growth, and then number three, giving them the responsibility and showing them, yes, we trust you, and we're going to trust that you are going to take ownership in your career. You're going to take ownership in the projects and so on. Give them more responsibilities, and pretty much like get them to, like, I know that a lot of organizations say, yes, we want our employees to grow with us. Well, then show it through giving responsibilities, taking them to professional development opportunities. And if you're here, that means you're on the right track because you're
right,
learning to do all that.
right. Yeah, and I've heard and seen the data a lot that one thing that defines, I think, the younger generations, millennials and younger millennials coming into the workforce or being in the workforce, is that they're more vocal and of wanting that growth, wanting that career growth, that development. That it's something that's really important. Where other generations maybe wanted career growth, but salary and security were maybe higher on the list. Feel like developing them is going higher up. And I'm hearing that if people are not getting the development they want, then they don't see where their career is going to go, then they're going to go off and leave somewhere. So how do we address that and make sure that we give our millennial employees the development that they want?
The best thing to do is, again, it really goes back to understand them as humans. And like I know that other sessions in the summit, they are going to be talking about developing own career plans and so on. But it is really imperative from the organizational level to understand not only of your strategic objectives, but also understand what the employees have in terms of their career objectives, and ask them, because you're going to be surprised that maybe someone that you thought of promoting into managers or whatever, they might not even want to be managers in the first place. They're just happy being that creative director where they'll deal with the supervisory components within the projects, but they don't want to head steer the whole entire department. Or it could be that it could be that their employee, until you ask them the question, you don't even realize that they are having a huge identity crisis, and they're thinking that I should have gotten a business degree instead of chemistry degree because I want to be doing pharmaceutical marketing. You have, like, because once you know about those things about your employees, your organization will be able to provide for that. And if you can't, well, there's other sources that you can get help from. But the point being, you have to have an open, transparent conversation with them and telling them, listen, I want to help you and I am invested in your growth as much as you are invested in the growth. Let's see how we can work things out together based on what the organization is looking for and based on what you're looking for. And I think we're going to be both surprised as to how we can help you mold your career in the direction that you want to be going and based on your strengths. Am I making sense with this response?
Yeah, absolutely. It's aligned with what I'm hearing and thinking, which is we got to treat everybody as individuals, and you got to have those conversations to find out what people really want, what's going on with them. They want to connect with you. So, with that in mind, what do you see the best companies doing to attract, retain, develop millennials, especially in these virtual times?
Virtual times, I see the best companies, the common practice, I'll say, number one, they know how to communicate with the
Mm.
millennials and Gen Zs, because I see a lot of organizations that have great policies, they have great leaders. And if you look from the paper perspective, there is no reason for the younger employees to be leaving. If anything, the younger employees should be coming to them being like, you know what, like, you're stuck with me forever unless I get terminated for whatever reason. But yet they're experiencing this attrition rates because the employees are feeling that, oh, this is like, I don't see this company in my future plans in terms of what they can offer for me. That problem could have been just fixed by organization addressing, hey, did you know that if you do decide to go back to school, you have an option of working part-time throughout the school year, and then you work full-time during summer? That could have kept that employee on for another 3 years. So that's that communication component that a lot of organizations that excel with the millennials are doing really well on. The other thing is on the transparent communication, self-explanatory. The more employees feel understood, the more they're going to want to give back to the organization. So those will be 2 things. And the other thing will be they are very open to the perspectives as to, okay, how can the organization progress forward? They don't shut down employees' ideas. And I guess in between the direct manager and the employee relationship, that openness that openness is quite prevalent amongst the organization, not just at the top level, not just at the immediate level, whatever it might be. It is a part of their culture, and younger employees feel safe to be there, so they don't leave. So that's that's what I see as the common patterns between the
Yeah,
organizations.
so really big on communication, transparency, understanding what people truly want, personalizing the experience. When we think about the people who are watching and listening to this being in talent development, looking for the best ways to engage and develop all of their people, what other advice do you have, especially when it comes to putting development programs together? I know you're not a fan of one size fits all training, right, for managers. So, what else would you add in terms of best practices for engaging and developing our younger generations?
When it comes to developing younger generation, you have really good questions, by the way.
Well, thank you.
So when you understand the psychographics, right? So I feel that it tends to swing one way or another when we are trying to develop the employees. Either you are sending them to all kinds of trainings and so on to a point where the employee is thinking, I feel like I'm falling behind at work, or you're sending them to almost no trainings at all. There's like one-off trainings here and there, and the employee's feeling, I feel like I just get to learn something new once a year, and you need a really, really good middle ground. So when you're putting together talent development initiatives, so number one, you have to be mindful of what they're going through. So for example, maybe don't send them to an industry conference during a holiday season when they want to be spending time with their family, or so be mindful of their workload. Give them an option. I'll say, okay, so would you want to go training on this date or whatever it might be. So help them to manage their time around that, because it's training for a lot of organization, it's still an extra thing that is being done for the employees on top of whatever they're doing. And the other thing is really be mindful of their learning notes per se. So maybe some, like your millennial employees or Gen Z employees, they might learn better. Well, it depends on their learning style. Maybe they learn better audio wise, maybe they learn better video wise, or maybe they want to be in that simulation situation, or that totally this experiential learning, immersive learning, and yada yada yada. But you have to be mindful of, okay, what learning modes will keep our employees most engaged, and make sure that whatever talent development initiatives that you're putting in place is going to reflect that. And the other thing is, I think they just a lot of people in the summit mentioned this already, but around like the bite-sized learning, because of the younger employees' attention spans being particularly short, like how they read is through just scroll, 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 stop and read, scroll, 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 scroll. That's what they're used to. They're not going to be doing that as much in the organizational setting because things need to get done. And that's how they are used. But they are definitely more used to bite-sized information. So if you're able to accommodate to that, then you're going to have a lot better time when it comes to creating a talent development initiative that keeps them engaged, and something that they can actually remember after a couple of years.
Yeah, and we've seen, as I've studied the trends in talent development over the last couple of years, the rise of micro learning continues to get more popular, right? And there's a lot of platforms out there that provide that, Udemy, LinkedIn Learning, things like that, where you can provide people with those quick hits the same way they learn things at home with YouTube and Googling and everything else, like read, apply, back and forth. Like you said, they're used to jumping around a lot more. We've covered a lot of ground in this conversation, Claire. Anything else you would add in terms of what people need to know to really address the needs of their younger generation workers?
Needs of the younger generational work. I think we pretty much. I think we pretty much covered it all. There's a lot that we covered. So
yeah, if I look back at my notes and we talked about, we defined the younger generations. We talked about what younger millennials and Gen Z want in the workplace, the biggest mistakes that organizations make when it comes to the younger generations, how to deal with higher attrition for younger employees. We talked about millennial managers having lower attrition than their counterparts, which is really interesting. How to give the right development opportunities to millennials, the importance of having conversations and understanding what people truly want to help them develop in their careers, what the best companies are doing to attract, retain, and develop their millennial employees. We talked about the importance of communication and transparency, which is important for everyone across all generations, of course. What to consider when creating talent development initiatives for your people, and the importance of using bite-sized learning, on-demand learning for people, especially on younger generations that are used to kind of jumping around. Claire, this has been great. Anything else you'd add? And where can people go to find you, read more of your content, and work with you if they want to?
The best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn. I pretty much post something free every single day. And there should be links in the summits,
I
some
think
in some
so, somewhere around here.
as
Yeah.
well if you'd want my free ebooks or whatever it might be. So.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure to drop that stuff in there. Claire, thank you so much for being here, for sharing so much great wisdom and all the value that you shared. For those of you tuning in, thank you so much for watching and listening and for being here. I hope you took some notes. As always, make sure you write down what are those 1 or 2 key takeaways. What's something you can take with you to go back and do your job better, something you want to keep doing, something you want to change. Write that down, set a goal, take some action. As usual, we need you to do that to make it worth your time and our time as well. And make sure, if you haven't already, to upgrade to the All Access Pass so that you can get access to this and all of our sessions for forever, and join our live interactive sessions as well. Again, my name is Andy Storch. I really appreciate you being here with us, and I'll see you in the next session.